Before going into the subject of Jesus' ministry, I think it is meaningful to summarize and evaluate the conclusions of the 3 previous studies, for those of you who didn't have the opportunity yet to listen to it. It could be that the more orthodox believers among you struggle with the question if one may interfere with the literal text by dissecting it for the reconstruction of the course of events. After all, the Bible is considered the infallible Word of God, and therefore sacred territory. But there are good arguments to be said against that notion. Psalm 119 verse 130 reads, "The entrance of thy words giveth light. It giveth understanding unto the simple." In other words, simplicity isn't always the right approach of a complex issue, like the scriptures in effect are. There's some serious explanation to do, based on a decent study, not only of the text but also of its context. In this, I try to be as transparent as possible, so that the consistency of my line of thought can be checked, and it is always open to debate. In my view, the Bible definitely is the infallible Word of God, not so much in a literally sense, but in its spiritual meaning. It can't be denied, there are many flaws and contradictions in the literal text which don't allow to be conveniently brushed under the carpet. There is a difference between credulity and faith. It is my aim to meet the needs of the more investigative among you, for a logical base of your belief system. We are not called to love God with our heart and soul only. The truth is out there for anyone to see. In this respect, the gospel is simple. It takes a lot of research, though, to get to the roots of it, and to gain insight in its consequences. The Gospels are a rendition of a redacted set of oral and written sources, often in the form of snippets of papyri. Luke, as a non-Jewish doctor, even might have done his meticulous investigations from a scientific viewpoint, as a sort of medical checkup of a patient. He might have interviewed certain witnesses, like Maria, the mother of Jesus. Nonetheless, he also might have missed out on some sources that are used by the other evangelists. Luke's gospel is theme-based rather than time-based. If we would follow his timeline to a T, we would have to skip Matthew's story about the wise men and their travel to Egypt in its entirety. That wouldn't do our Christmas celebrations any good, would it? Luke wrote his gospel as a plea, in support of Paul's ministry, to explain the ins and outs of his message to the Romans. And by all means, he did a wonderful job, also by writing the book of Acts. Hence, the Gospels do not necessarily reflect the historical timeline, the actual course of events, but the issues are put within a meaningful framework based on a certain theme or subject. First and foremost, they are a form of liturgy, especially Mark, probably used by the early church in a cycle of a few years. This according to the reading of the Torah in the synagogues. Because the synagogue forms the matrix for the Christian church in its early infancy. Many people were illiterate, therefore the scriptures had to be read out to them. This is what Jesus meant when he said in Matthew 5 verse 1, "Ye have heard that it was said." Like Paul stated in Romans 10 verse 17, "So then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God." Also, his own letters to the churches weren't put in print, but read out to the believers. The Christmas story belongs to the most renowned themes, along with the parables and the crucifixion. Because they form the core of 2 of the most celebrated annual festivals, Christmas and Easter. And yet, they are also the most misunderstood and misrepresented stories of the gospel. They serve as a canvas against which some pagan traditions are being projected, rooting in Sumerian mysticism. The 25th of December is the birth date of Tammuz, the son of Nimrod and Semiramis, the rulers of Babylon. She presented Tammuz as the son of God, and herself as the goddess mother, the queen of heaven, Madonna with child. The 40 days fast, the Easter bunny and the Easter eggs are her brainchildren as well. By reconstructing the narrative in a logical and sensible fashion, I have tried to paint a clear picture of the course of events, which makes the story more believable, I suppose. Jesus wasn't born in the year 0 of the modern calendar, but around 7 BC. At the time, Israel was made part of Syria. The manger wasn't a feeding trough, but a fenced box, as part of a stable, designated to separate a slaughter animal from the herd. The Star of Bethlehem wasn't so much a celestial body, but rather a group of angels, observed by the wise men in an astral fashion from their residence in Babylon, in line with what they had learned from Daniel about the timeline leading up to the birth of the future king of the world. There were no 3 wise men, but a group of priests, accompanied by a caravan of servants and soldiers. They brought the Holy Family to Egypt, for protection from the rage of King Herod the Great. As a child, Jesus wasn't some sort of a boy wonder, doing all kinds of miracles, but more of an inquisitive kid, studying the Torah with zeal and passion. We know that from his reaction to the rich young man, in Mark 10 verse 19 to 21. Thou knowest the commandments: do not commit adultery, do not kill, do not steal, do not bear false witness, defraud not, honor thy father and mother. And he answered and said unto him, Master, all these have I observed from my youth. Then Jesus, beholding him, loved him, and said unto him, One thing thou lackest: go thy way, sell whatsoever thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come, take up the cross, and follow me. This obvious spark of recognition made Jesus' heart jump from joy, finding a kindred spirit in a stinging, lawless world. There is only one other person whom he loved that way, namely his disciple John. In the end, hanging at the cross, he confided the care for his mother Mary to him, as a consolation and replacement of her oldest son. This rules out the conjecture that he may have gone to India to be initiated in some Far East religion. After Joseph's passing, he, as the eldest son, took over his position as head of the family. The Hebrew calendar is a lunisolar calendar, used today for Jewish religious observance, and as an official calendar of Israel. The system of keeping time in the Old Testament was based on the moon cycle. The Hebrew lunar calendar contained 12 months of 30 days. Keeping the lunar calendar coordinated with the seasons of the year required adding a 13th month to the lunar calendar. 7 out of every 19 years. This additional month was added to the end of the year, following the last month Adar, and was simply called Second Adar. The new year started on the first of the 7th month with the Festival of Trumpets. Because this day was based on the observation of the crescent moon, nobody knew the day or the hour. Which is also being said about the return of Christ. The last trumpet was an extended tone. This event played a significant role in Jesus' ministry, which we will elaborate on in the next part of this study.